Alright, peace. How y'all doing? How you feeling tonight?
Alright.
Alright. So this is the first installment of Associated University 2020, where we're trying to put together an educational program for musicians here in St. Louis. And so you all come to learn today about music theory. Maurice Egeston is going to be our instructor tonight, so I'm happy to have you all here. Before we get started, I'm going to read Maurice's biography. We're going to get into the lesson. Alright. So Maurice Mo Egeston is a pianist, band leader, and educator from St. Louis, Missouri. He spends his musical time leading bands and writing music, while also working as a collaborative artist, accompanist, and educator in both the classroom and private studio. A longtime veteran of the St. Louis music scene, Mo currently leads Mo E All-Stars, who released their debut album in 2017. He developed and currently hosts an event called Late Night Grooves at the Dark Room, created through his residency first year with the Princeberg Arts Foundation. He emerged as a band leader in the 1990s with regional favorites Vargas Swing. Mo later wrote and released music globally with the pioneering live electronic music project Urban Jazz Naturals, and was a member of St. Louis bass rock band Brothers Lazaroff from 2008 to 2014. As a pianist, Mo Egeston did his graduate studies at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, with Dr. Linda Perry. He currently runs his own Mo Egeston Piano Studio and is an instructor at Typin Performing Arts. He has taught adjunct classes at area colleges and universities in the St. Louis area since 1996. Presenting Mo Egeston.
So basically, I just do what I can to keep the lights on. Alright, so tell me about your backgrounds. Anybody here have a lot of actual lessons, or do you play and read music? What's your background?
I mainly have a background. I started playing by ear.
Okay.
And then over time, I've had like a little bit of lessons here and there once I started to say well, I don't want to get lost into a conversation.
Right.
So I just gradually learned a little bit more. I've been playing keyboard ever since like 7 or 8, so
predominantly by ear.
Yeah, but I mainly use my musicianship for like production.
Okay,
so,
sure. Sure.
That's my story.
Cool.
I just play around a little bit. I got my first keyboard at 15.
Okay.
I play by ear. I've had no lessons.
No lessons, okay.
Alright, I've been playing sparingly for some years now. I've had a few actual lessons, and so I do know my way a little bit around the keyboard, but I don't know much theory at all.
Gotcha.
So drums is my first instrument, and I took a percussion class where I learned how to read percussion. However, reading bass clef is new.
Okay.
I also play the bass guitar, and I've been taking lessons on piano on and off for like a year.
Okay. So everybody at least has their fingers on the keyboard. Within 1 hour, of course, I can't get into all the depth that there is with music theory, so I'm just going to run through some things. Everybody get one of these. You can see I'm old school, because just in case I printed everything out. So this is just kind of an outline of what I'm going to touch on, at least some of the things that we're going to get to, and then hopefully looking at these terms, you can use these as a launching point for yourself to explore, because with the kind of backgrounds and interests that you have, although having lessons is good, there's a lot of information out there that you can work with yourself and kind of take this as a start, and move forward from there. One thing I would really draw your attention to, looking on this handout here, is the website that I listed at the very top, musictheory.net. And that's where you're going to see me pulling up some examples, like this first example I have up here. This comes from that website. It's completely free. Now, if you go to it from, like an iPhone or Pad, they're probably going to try to push you to the app. But if you just use a traditional browser, you can navigate all of this stuff like this, and you don't have to pay anything. So I would definitely suggest this, because it's got some nice, as you scroll through the different information, kind of walks you through each step of what they're discussing with some nice graphics up top. So we're going to be working from that to kind of, show what I'm talking about. All right, so the first thing when you think about music theory in general is that it is easiest to know theory if you're working from the keyboard, if you're working from the piano. Not to say that other instrumentalists can't be great at theory, but most people that are well-rounded with music can work from the keyboard because it's all in front of you. And that's really what's important about it. The basic idea, the black keys and the white keys, sounds like everybody's seen enough keyboard to know that. Are we all familiar with the idea of letter names on the keyboard?
Yes.
Finding the different letter names? Do you have that background? Okay. Okay, well, let's start there then. The main thing is, as you look at your keyboard, I'll pull this one up here. There could be 88 keys, there could be 61, 76, the controllers these days, 32, whatever keys, number of keys that you have. But what's important is to notice that you got groups of 2 black keys and 3 black keys, all up and down the instrument, and that's how you figure it out. So you really just want to focus within one span of notes of keys, including white and black, starting with where you see the 2 black keys and then the 3 black keys. The rest is all just repetition, higher or lower. So that just eliminates a lot of the noise when you're looking at that. As you look at the keyboard, let's see, we'll do it this way. One of the first things to think about is the concept of a half step. A half step is the smallest interval or distance between any 2 pitches in Western music. And I say that because, the tuning systems, if you're familiar at all with music of other cultures, like Indonesian music, for example, traditional Indonesian music will use scales that, quote, sound foreign to our Western ears because they're kind of in the cracks of the traditional keyboard. So everything I'm referring to is the system that we traditionally use. Just be aware there are other systems. But as you play up the keyboard, if you play every single note, that's moving by half steps. And half steps are the foundation for all of these different musical formulas that you can discover. So since not everybody has had their hands too much on the keyboard, everybody play a C right in the middle, which is going to be 2 black keys. Let me mark it up here, if that works. There it is. Right, that note right there. So that's a C. And just walk up to the next note, to the next note, next note, next note, and so forth. So that's half steps, right? And then once you know what a half step is, then you can figure out what a whole step is, because like anything else, 2 halves is going to make a whole. So where I'm going with that then is the idea of a scale. I'm sure we've heard the term scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Everybody's probably heard that. So really what a scale is a set of notes. On this keyboard, you have 12 possible notes. Boom, 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 going through the span before you get to any repetition. But you can't use all 12 of those notes in most musical situations. So really what a scale does is it eliminates some of the notes and it focuses you in on a set of tones from which you can then create melody and harmony. Your notes and your chords, basically. All right, so we're going to just figure out how to construct the major scale, which is the pattern that we're most accustomed to hearing in traditional music. The major scale is a formula that consists of these steps. The W's being the whole steps, the H being the half step. So first we'll let the computer do the work here and show you on C. You can kind of play along these notes as they appear. Now, if you've had no reading, of course, you see the stuff on the staff over there to the left. If you are interested in that part, just so you know, that's the note we call middle C. That very first symbol that you see there, that's the C. That's literally going to be in the middle of your instrument, no matter how many notes that you have. And then from there, you just follow the formula. So I'm on C, a whole step, go ahead and find the next note, which is D, exactly. And then as we follow here, we have another whole step, which is going to take us to E. And then we have a half step, which takes us to F. A whole step, which is going to take you to G. Whole step to A. Yep. Whole step to B. Half step to C. you know you've done it right if you start and finish on the same notes. And again, just for those interested in the staff, you may have heard there's little tricks on how to read the treble clef, like every good boy does fine, and face, some of y'all may know that. And all that's getting at is it helps you place the letters. If you put the word face, F-A-C-E, onto the staff, that can help you navigate. So that's a C, higher. That's the C that we started on. Now what you'll notice, that's all the white keys. So the key of C is the only situation where you can just play white keys and know that you're in the right scenario, in the right key. Anything else that you start on, you're going to incorporate some of the black keys, which are known as sharps or flats. Basically, if you think flat, like flat tire, it means to go down. And that's what this will be helpful if you don't have any of this background. Because if you look on the keys there, you notice how the top thing is a G on the first black key. Let me put it here too. Very first black key right here. And any of the other black keys can be easily named using either a sharp name or a flat name. So in this case, we could call it G flat or F sharp. And that's something that you can just kind of look at and think about a little bit, but we're going to be incorporating some of those black notes as we go up this next scale. All right, now find an E flat. Just match what you see out there, that second of the two black key groups, and then we'll walk through. All right, so the next one, we need a whole step. Somebody play it if you got it. Yep. So that's F, whole step, G, half step, right, A flat. In this case, we're going to keep calling them flats because we started with the flat. So the choice of flat or sharp if you're playing by ear, it really doesn't matter as much of what you call them. But if you're reading or, most importantly, trying to communicate with musicians of different backgrounds, that's where you want to be able to communicate in some fashion, using the traditional language. So if you start with the flat, you're going to stay with flats if you have the choice. All right, so now at A flat, we need a whole step. Okay, which is also B flat. Whole step. Right, that's a little tricky to see. Just remembering that we have to make two moves basically to get there. Whole step, and then half step. Right, so in this case, this particular key, E flat, A flat, and B flat, the three black notes that we hit, have to be present for you to properly be in the key of E flat, right? So that's your major scale. Now, the major scale has a kind of happy quality to it. If you're trying to write something that's more, upbeat, jolly, whatever, that's going to be your major scale. Now, if you take it and do this, then you're talking about lamb chops, and that's the minor scale, right? So we use the minor scale and the chords that come from it, some of them called minor chords as well, to do something more serious. And that's where for some reason, a lot of our soul music, a lot of our R&B lives in a lot of these, those type of minor chords more so, especially with those extra notes, those extended notes on there. All right, so let's just take a look at how you find a minor scale. It is simply a formula using a different collection of half notes, or half steps and whole steps. All right, so find an A, whole step to B, half step to C, whole step to D, whole step to E, we're a half step to F, whole step to G, and a whole step back to A. Right, so again, different pattern of notes. Now if you play those notes, Definitely a different sound than that major scale. And the point with all of these two ideas is that you can make major or a minor scale from any note on the keyboard as long as you follow the formula. That's the main point, all right? So that's something that you can explore. And one way that you get better at any of this, like anything else, is just you try to apply it. So you pick any random note on the keyboard and say, okay, let me create a major scale. Don't let yourself just use your ear. Think through the actual steps, right? And that'll get you there. And then go back and use your ear and make sure you're doing it right, basically. All right, so that's with scales. Now, from scales, we get to the thing that most people are interested in, and that's the idea of a chord. Now, simply, if you take a C and you play every other note and put them all together, that's some sort of chord. And in general, you can go up and down the right keys on the keyboard, and as long as you play every note, every other note, you're going to be playing a chord. That type of thing. So let's just walk through that. So play one on C. There you go. Move up a step. Right, now does anybody know how to determine whether a chord is major or minor? Those of y'all that have played, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, if it's major, then it's going to be like, it's like, okay, so you get the whole step, and then like, so it's every other one, but it's like one that's like a half step in there.
Right,
Like,
now,
like that.
play what you just played. That's not happy or sad.
That's sad.
So that's minor, exactly. And so what you get at is completely correct, and what you can do with that to find these is just count half steps, because your chords are formulas. Basically, I'll show you this on this sheet. The last couple of pages here are just some things that I use in other scenarios. What can be useful for you, especially if you've played and you're trying to get into more chords like seventh chords, is to look at this sheet where you have a list of intervals, which there's a staff at the top, and then on the left-hand side where it says number of half steps, and then it says major, minor, or perfect intervals. Those intervals are the building blocks of any type of chord that you want to create. So on that sheet, right? So if you're looking at creating, for example, let me see if I got mine up here. Okay, I didn't put that on mine, but if you're looking, for example, to create a major, what's known as a triad, just a 3-note chord, you can count by half steps from any note. So let's do it from E. Now don't play it if you already know it. Don't ruin the surprise. It's not a surprise. All right, so we got an E. Now, if we're going to count up half steps, we need 4 half steps to get our first interval. That's what's known as a major third. We count half steps by making a move. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. You put those two together, that's what's known as a major third. Now, there's a couple ways to get to your next note. Of course, we can hear it for sure, but 1, 2, 3, that's a minor third. And if you add that, major third, minor third, right? And that's how you can construct any major chord. Let's do one from here. One, 2, 3, 4. Yep, there it is. 1, 2, 3. Right. Now, we also, some folks think of it that way. Some folks think of it as major third, perfect fifth, right? Perfect is an interval description that's been around since like the Middle Ages, basically, when they used to connect spirituality and religion with the sounds on the keyboard, in other words, or the sounds of music in general. So in other words, that was thought to be the perfect, literally the perfect interval. So fifths and fourths, going back to this tradition are known as perfect. The other ones, major and minor, we describe that way. So on that list, that's why sometimes you see perfect, sometimes you see major, sometimes you see minor. All right, so that's how you make a major chord. You count those half steps, and that formula is there on the first page under where I have chords indicated. And so you can definitely refer back to that. And again, trying to apply it in some fashion is really the key. So under that chord category, where I have major triad, M3, the big M, that's what represents major. The little m in music theory to the top is what represents minor. And then you can see minor third plus perfect fifth, major third plus perfect fifth. All right, so let's actually jump in on inversions. Anybody know that term as it relates to chords? Yeah, familiar, probably not familiar. All right, so let's walk that through. A chord is a chord based on the letter names that are in that chord, not based on necessarily the order of those letter names. So everybody can you play a C chord and then play the different inversions? I'm picking up because you're close.
Then you got
And the key is, even though you're moving through different places, the basic sound is the same. Now, why is the sound the same? Because you're not changing actual letter names. So let's take a look at that. Oops, sorry. Let's get that. So we got that. So those notes that are being shown there, that's C, E, and G. Now all those numbers that they're showing you, that's similar to what I was already talking about. They're using half steps to find the notes, but where the red little triangles are, that's what you want to focus on for your chord. All right, now, if we're going to do an inversion of that chord, you just take the bottom note, which is C, and play the C up here, but keep those other two where you were. And I'm going to come around and show you since you haven't had this. All right, so that's what we call, leave that out for a minute, play those three together, right? Now this is a C, this is also a C. So you're going to get rid of this. Right, and that's what's known as an inversion. And you do the same thing one more time. Almost. You got it? That's it? And so, why inversions are helpful, all right, let's say, we're going to jump ahead a little bit. Let's say we're trying to go from a C chord to an F chord. So, for an F chord, first of all, let me show where that is.
The word.
So if I'm coming from a C chord down here, and then I want to play an F chord, that's not going to be the best way to get to it. You don't really want to have to hide your hand all the time if you can avoid that. And it doesn't sound as nice, it doesn't have what's known as smooth voice leading. So instead, you play an inversion based on where you started. Who's doing that? Who just did that? Right here. So play your first chord, the C chord. So he's playing C, E, and G. Now do what you did. Now he's playing C, F, and A.
Yeah.
That's still defined as an F chord. You familiar with that concept?
Yep.
You familiar with that concept? Ish? Yeah, exactly. So the idea is that if there's a note in common, you stay on that note and then you move the other fingers as needed to get to the chord that you want. And so instead of the progressions doing that, you can have more smoother movement. So you're looking for closer versions of the chords that you're trying to get to. And again, that's something that a lot of times people's ears naturally respond to if you have that kind of background. All right, let's see, because I want to make sure that we hit some things for the folks that have played a little more, and then we can walk through them for you that have not. So is there anything that you want to address in particular, or some aspects of your background that you can think of, or anybody that you want me to get to as we enter into our second half of this session?
Progressions.
Anything in particular?
Progressions.
Okay. So, which part? tell me what you're thinking about.
Just how to go about writing in a way that makes sense.
All right. Okay. Gotcha. Let's take a look. So basically, chord progressions have to do with. There's a couple ways to get to them. Let me see here.
Like that circle.
Right. So who's familiar with the circle? You know the circle?
Just a little bit, but that's something.
I've been trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So this is probably where we need to be for those of you all that have played. So basically, with the circle, it's two things. Going this way, it's called the circle of fifths because it's a fifth between each letter name. This is all our 12 possibilities for scales. Right, so C major scale, G major scale, D major, all the way around. Down here, we're seeing it as flat or sharp because you can call it either way. Traditionally here, we're going to call that D flat and so forth. The little part that you can't read as clearly, but that's on your sheet too. That's what's known as the key signature, which basically says, if you're reading music, this top little thing is a sharp, and it's saying to be in the key of G, you have to have an F sharp. Right, so each one of your key signatures as you go through the circle gets more dense because you're adding sharps as you go. It's all very much based on formula. Then when you max out the sharps, 7, that's as many as you can have. Then you really have to start thinking of them as flats. You decrease your flats, and eventually you end up back on C. So if you're thinking about just traditional theory and trying to play scales and see how keys work, that's that direction. But the direction that you're really interested in is the other way. If you play a chord of some type, and there are things you have to do that make things stronger. In other words, certain types of movements resolve or pull from one chord to another. Those movements traditionally happen this direction. So if I have a chord based on E, and if I do it properly, it's going to flow into A. And if I have a chord based on A, it's going to flow into D. And if I have a chord based on G and D and G and so forth. So a good example of that, everybody play D minor. So D, F, and A, so find your D. There you go. I'll pull that up just in case you do it.